Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to build an expense tracker application using Spring Boot. This is a perfect project for anyone who is looking to manage their finance or learn more about the Spring Boot. So without further ado, let's create the project. So first step, what do we need to do? The first step, we need to navigate to the start.spring.io. Over there we can choose that what kind of project we need to create, like either Maven or maybe Gradle. So based on the selection we need to, like, let me show you that how we are going to choose this one. So over there you can see that start.spring.io. Here you can choose that what kind of project you need to create, either Maven or Gradle. Over there also you need to choose this language from over here, either Java, Kotlin, Groovy, then Spring Boot dependencies, and these are the kind of artifact kind of things we need to choose from over here. After choosing all the details, like here we need to choose the dependencies like Spring Boot DevTools, Lombok, DataJPA, MySQL, Spring Web. Here I am using this MySQL because I am going to save all the data into the MySQL database, but it's a feel free to use any other database like Oracle and any other databases. So as we are going to use the Spring REST web, so that's why like we have used the Spring web, because we need to create some kind of the REST APIs using application using Spring MVC, and also it's having the embedded Apache Tomcat. So after downloaded or created the project, I have imported in my editor. I am using editor as Eclipse as a editor. You guys can use any editor, whatever you guys feel like. If we note, like if you check the pom.xml file over here, all the dependencies are mentioned, whatever dependencies we have choose from the ones while we're creating the project. So here if you see that Spring Boot Starter Data JPA, Spring Boot Starter Web, Spring Boot DevTools, MySQL connector. So these are the dependencies we need to add over here. Also we have used the Lombok for it's having some more benefit. I'll show you that what kind of benefits it's give us. Okay, so next we are going to write the code. We will like project setup is done now. Next we are going to create the model, setting up the repositories, service layer and the controller layer. Once all the things will be done, then we can test all the APIs from the Postman. Then all the things will be done, then we can check that how it will be work. So let's, in the next we are going to create this model and the service layer. Let's create those things. As I said, we need to create the model over here. So for creating the model we need to choose we need to create another package actually, where we need to keep those models. So what models? Let me create the package first, then we are going to create that model. So how we are going to create this model? What it is opening? Let me close it. Now from here we can create this package. So let's say the package name will be the dot model. Okay, now here we need to create one class which will be basically same as the like expense database, means this particular table we need to create in the backend, this will be similar to that, right? So this same table we need to create in the backend. So what fields we need to keep over here, like let's say ID, which will be the auto generated, then like expense name, expense category and the expense amount. So these are the fields we need to keep over here. Okay, we need to import this. So let's say this long is the ID, it will be the auto incremented. Okay, so for that we need to annotate this particular field with the ID annotation, because this particular annotation this ID will be treated as a primary key, because this will be the unique for the particular table, right? So ID, then expense name, expense category and the expense amount. These are the fields that we need to keep over under this expense table. Here also we need to use some kind of the annotations like getter, setter, all argument constructor, all no argument constructor, then builder, entity and the tables. These are the annotations I'm going to use over here. So how these annotations are coming? Like these annotations, if you noticed over here, this all the things are coming from the Lombok. So this is the benefit of using the Lombok as a dependencies. If we are not using this Lombok as a dependencies, then getter, setter, constructor, all the things we need to create manually. Okay, so this is the benefit of this getter and setter, right? If we remove this one getter and setter, then if you noticed that these are actually yellow and said that here getter and setter is not available, actually these are not used. But if we are using this getter and setter, then those warning will be gone actually. So this is the benefit of this Lombok. Next, what we need to create? We need to create the repository, right? So here we can create another package which will be the repository. So what is the need of this repository? Repository is basically, once we are going to create this particular, like what do you say, like whenever we are going to communicate with the databases, then we need this repository, right? This repository extends basically JPA repository, and here the table name and the table primary key ID we need to add over here. So this is the repository. Based on this repository, basically whatever the database operation we need to perform, that we need to do using this repository, like save operations, fetch, update, delete, all the operations we need to do perform using this repository. Okay, so next what we can do, we need to create one service layer. Over there we need to write all the functionalities. All the functionalities means like add expenses, update expenses, get expense, and the delete expenses. All the operations we need to done over here. But before that, we need to create one DTO over here, because based on this DTO we need to like maybe whenever any request will come, we are expecting those requests will come as a DTO. Then what we need to do, we need to like actually we need to move those things as a DTO. Then we are going to map those things. So here we are going to create one class. Let me create this class expense DTO, and here we are going to keeping those fields like long ID, okay, next expenses, expense name, then expense category, expense name, then expense category, and then finally expense amount. Okay, so these are the fields we need to keep over here. Means whatever the data we are going to get from the request, those will be come as a in this particular DTO format. Okay, and here we are using this data, all argument constructor, no argument constructor, and the builder. Okay, so these are the things are done now. Next we are going to create the service layer. Okay, so let create that service layer. So for creating the service, basically first of all we need to create the service package. So I'm creating that package first, and then I'm going to add the class over there, like the name will be the expenses service. Okay, so here it will be a service layer, so we need to annotate this particular class with service annotations, because else it will be not able to create the bin of it. So we need to annotate this particular class with service annotation. Okay, so this is a stereotype annotation. Okay, now what we are going to do, first of all we need to use that expense repository over here, right? And then we need to use that required argument constructor, right? Then it will be able to create the inject that particular bin. Okay, so now we are going to create one method which will basically add the expenses into the database. So for that we need to create this method like add expenses, and here we need to pass this expense DTO. This DTO having these are the informations like ID. Initially it will be not created, so we are expecting this name, category, and the amount, right? So these are the coming over here, and then we are going to we need to just convert this DTO to the entity, right? So let me add this method over here. Like what it will do, it will basically convert this DTO like to the expense entity, because else we are not able to save the data. So first of all we need to call this method, which will basically convert this expense DTO to expense entity. Then based on this repository we are going to save the data, like return this repository dot save. Here we need to pass this expense, this entity over here. After that it will return the same entity, right? And so what we need to return from over here, we just need to return this ID. Like this will be the automatic generated ID, and this ID we are going to return over here. So this will be the adding the expenses into the database. What we have done over here, we have just converted this DTO to the entity, and then we are saving the data into the database. After that we are returning that ID. Next we are going to update the expenses. Whatever the is there any expense update is over there, so then we need to update that particular expenses. So we are receiving this expense DTO, like whatever the DTO is there, it will be having this ID, name, category and the amount. So whatever the details they need to update, so based on the ID it will be updated. So here again we need to convert this DTO to the expense entity, correct? After that we need to check that ID, if like what for updating any information into the database we need this ID, because ID is the primary key. If anyone forgot to pass this ID, then we need to return some kind of exception, like this ID is basically required. So for that we need to check that DTO is having this ID. So even we can add this before converting this DTO to the entity, like here if ID is null, then we can throw that illegal argument exception. Then what we are going to do, like we are going to we can say we need to check that whatever the ID they have passed, that is actually available into the database or not, right? Because if it is not available, then we need to throw some kind of exception, correct? So here we need to first, based on this repository, we need to check find by ID with this ID. If it is available, then it is return the safety exception. Else we are going to throw that status bad request and cannot find this ID with this one, right? With this ID we are not able to find the data that we can see. We can return some exception, like this is not actually available into the database, correct? So now what we can do, we can just set the data over here, and then we can update the data accordingly. Like here in the saved exceptions we can save we can set the name, category and the amount, and finally based on this repository, using this repository we can save the data into the database, like it will be the update the data. So this will be the approach to update the expense details into the database. Next what we can do, we can get expenses, right? That we can check, like get expense by ID actually, okay? So for that also we can do similar kind of approach, like we just need to see using this ID. If this is actually available, then it is fine, else we can say like that resource actually not available, okay? That we can see actually. So this expense, let me create one exception over here, okay? This is the runtime exception that we need to create. So here under this service layer we can add this exception, okay? Let me change this package, okay? So it is a runtime exception. If you see this, extend this runtime exception, it will just send the messages. So this runtime exception we can use over here, okay? And it will run this map to DTO, like whatever the data we are getting over here, in the service layer. So this will convert this map to whatever this entity we have received, it will basically return this one. what it will do, it will return this entity to the DTO. It will convert this DTO to the entity, and it will convert this expense entity to the DTO. So here get expense by ID. First we are trying to get find by ID. If it is find like already available into the database, then it is fine, else it will throw that expense not found exception. This is a runtime exception that we have created, and here we are passing also the message that cannot find the expense by ID. So in this way we can do this one. Next we can add that get all expenses. So what we can do over here, it will fetch all the records, like find all. This method actually return all the expenses from the database. Then we are just using the stream, we are converting this entity to DTO. This DTO we are converting this one, and then again we are returning to list. It is a okay, if you see this one, so get all expenses. And the last one, we can delete the expenses by ID. So what we are going to expect over here, here we need to pass this ID, long ID, and based on this ID is this repository already having this method delete by ID, and this here we need to pass just ID, and based on that it will delete the record from the database. So in the service layer, what we have done over here, we have added one method which will save the expense details into the database, that is called the add expenses. Update expenses, it will also update the expenses which are already available. If that particular ID is null or that particular ID is not available into the database, in the same time it will throw the exception so that user can understand that whatever the ID I am passing, it is not a valid. So once the ID will be valid, then the data will be updated in the backend for the respective ID. Next we are fetching expenses by the ID. Next get all the expenses, like whatever the expenses are available, all the expenses will be fetched and it will be converted from the expense entity to the DTO. And the last one is delete the expenses by ID. In next what we will do, we will create the one controller. Over there we are going to call all the respective method, and then finally we are going to check from the postman. So let's create the controller and add this particular services. So for adding the controller, basically we need to create another package over here which will basically having the controller class. Let me add this controller layer over here. So next basically we need to create this expense controller under this package. The name of this controller will be, let's say, expense controller. We can keep any name, whatever, like it will be feasible or it will be look good over there. So I'm adding this expense controller. So now, like as it will be behaved as a REST controller, so we need to annotate this class with the REST controller. Also we are adding the path of this request mapping will be the API expenses request required all argument constructor, because we can inject the services over here. Like we are creating the final, like let me add this one. So because as we can inject these services, there are actually multiple options to inject the services into the existing class. So this is the one of the options, like for create either constructor injection. So I'm doing the constructor injection over here, so that's why I am using this annotation. Okay, so next I am going to add this add expenses API over here. So for this add expenses API, okay, so this is a post mapping. So here if you see that we are using this request body as a expense DTO over here. It's having this ID, expense name, category and the amount, right? And here using this expense service, we are adding this we are already having this method add expenses in the service layer. We are just calling this method from the controller layer over here, and it is returning the expense ID. If we click this, then if you see that it is returning the ID of it is. And next, like here we are just returning this ID, like expense created with this ID, and here we are passing this ID, right? So this is for the add expenses. Next we are going to do for this update expenses. So as it is a post mapping, basically as we are doing some kind of the adding the data into the database, so that's why it will be a kind of post mapping. But update, it's a put mapping, right? Update means we are going to update something, so in the similar situation we are going to use the put mapping. So post is for once we are going to add the data into the database, then post as we are going to update the data, then put mapping. Here we are similar kind of thing, getting the data in a DTO, and using this service we are calling that update expense method. Next we are going to use this get all expenses. Okay, get all expenses. So here if you see this get all expenses, so this will be the get mapping. So over there we are going to use this get mapping annotations, right? Get mapping. Okay, next is that get mapping with the ID, like expenses by ID, get expense by ID. Another method we have created which will return the all. Another one is the get expense by this ID. It will be the get mapping, but ID we need to pass as a path variable. So here if you see this, we are taking this ID as a path variable. So we need to use this get mapping where we need to pass this ID as a path variable, like whatever the ID will be, like 1 2 3 4. So those ID we need to pass as a path variable over here. And here you need to see that expense service dot get expense, and here we are passing this ID, so it will fetch the details by this ID over here, right? So this is the get expense by ID, and the last one is the delete data by ID, right? This is the another service method we have created, that will be the delete by ID. Here also we are taking the ID as a path variable, and here we need to use the delete mapping because it will be the delete the record from the database. So here if you see from the beginning, like for adding the expenses into the database we are using the post mapping. For updating the request from the in the backend we are using the put mapping. For fetching the records we are using the get mapping, and for delete it will be the delete mapping. And all the methods are created, I created in the service layer, so all the things are available. So now the controller actually is ready. Next what we are going to do, we just need to start this application and we can check from the postman. So let's start this application and we need to check from the postman that all the things are working fine or not. Okay, just one more point actually, as we are going to use the databases as MySQL database, so we need to add some properties over here, right? So let me add this schema name and all the things over here, else it will not able to understand, right? So if you see this, the data source URL, we need to define that basics underscore tutorial, then username, password. What it will do, this update these properties, it will, like as we have created this model actually expense, so we need to create this particular table manually in the database, or using this property once the applications will be up, then automatically it will create the table into this particular schema for us, means we don't need to manually do anything. Next we need to define the driver class name, dialect, and it will show the SQL, and also it will format the SQL. So these properties we need to add in the properties file, else it will give us the exception while we are going to start this application. Next we are going to start this application and we will check from the postman. So for start this applications we need to start from over here. Let me show you. So before starting the application, let's see that from this schema actually. So if we see this schema, so here actually these two tables got created. So this expenses table is not created. So now we can start this applications. So this is the main entry point actually. Over here you can see like this run as Java applications. So once we click this, it will start in the backend. It will take some time, and also it will print those SQLs like the creations of the tables and all. Okay, let me just expand it so that if you see that that particular SQL will also be created, the table. Okay, if you see this create table expenses, okay, that means this is create the table. Now if we open the over here and refresh it, so if you see that the table got created over here. and it's having this ID, expense amount, category, and the expense name. Okay, so that means application got started over here. So let me clear the console. So now from the postman we can see, we can check, like, so first of all we need to add the expenses. So how we are going to add the expenses? As it is a post method, so we can provide the expense name, category, and the amount. So let me send it. So once we'll send that expense created with ID 1. Now if we open the database, then we can see that this data got inserted. Okay, now we can see another, like another details, another like expenses. Let's say movie, let's say 1000. Okay, if we insert, then it will be expense created with ID 2, and if we refresh we can see the data over here. Now if we want to update the data, like, or if we want to get the details, right? So let's say by ID, here we are passing the ID, then we are getting the details. Let's say we are passing as a 10, then it will, we are expecting some kind of the exception, like, because this ID expense not found exception, because this ID actually not available, right? This 10 ID is not available, only 1 and 2 is available. Okay, also we can fetch all the records by this get expense. So here it will return all the, like, if you see that 1 and 2. Okay, if we want to update, correct? So for update basically it's a put. So here we need to pass this one ID 1. So currently it's a grocery, and the expense name also grocery, and the category also grocery. So we can update it to the expense name is the grocery, and the description will be description updated. So now if we want to send this one, so it's 200 success. Now if we refresh this one, so if you see this description is updated, means data got updated over here. The last one is delete by ID. So here if we like pass this one ID, means one is already available. Now if we send this request, then you can see the data got deleted successfully. And now if we want to refresh, so if you see the one record got deleted successfully from over here. Okay, so this is the way, basically these are the postman, that from where basically we can see that how we are going to doing this one. So this is actually all about that, how we are going to build the expense tracker, complete like expense tracker application using the Spring Boot. I hope you found this application or this tutorial is helpful. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more tech tutorials. See you in my next videos, and also I will add this particular tutorial or code into the means in a GitHub section, so that from there you can access the code. If you guys have any issues or any doubt, please do let me know in the comment section. See you in my next videos. Bye bye.